Okay, and welcome to the first Smash Mounting Footballs podcast of 2024. And I'm here once again with our UK-based journalist, Conor to talk all things NFL, which includes this week the coaching carousel and also heading into wildcard weekend. Conor, how did you get on over the Christmas and New Year?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, we're in a new year. This is, as a Lions fan, this is normally my favourite time of the season, the off season. But I've got to get used to waiting maybe an extra month for it to all begin for us.
You have a tasty one with the Rams coming up, and we'll get to that later. But just kind of breaking news over the last while Pete Carroll is after stepping down as head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. What's your first impression of that?
Yeah, it's surprising. Obviously, it just broke before recording here, and I mean he's been with the team for 14 years, won a couple of Super Bowls, but yeah, it looks like his time's up there. I think I even remember someone asked him a couple of days ago if he'll be here next year, and he sounded confident, like, yeah, I'll be here. Maybe that was him saying he'd be here, maybe in a front office. I guess they didn't specify for that, but yeah, definitely a shocking move, and shocking as well with Mike Vrabel last night as well.
Two of the big coaches you thought would be securing their jobs after leaving. I'm very surprised by Pete Carroll. Looking at him on the side of the field, you think he'd want to stay on as head coach, but maybe the decision was made for him. In terms of the Seahawks, what do you think they'll be looking for in terms of their next head coach?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you never really know which direction teams are going to go off, if they're going to be an offensive or defense style. I think naturally with the Seahawks, you just assume it would be a bit defensive because Pete Carroll. But I think one name that stands out to me most right now is probably Dan Quinn, the DC of the Cowboys. Obviously, yeah, he was there with Pete Carroll. He was the defensive coordinator. I think when they maybe won a Super Bowl, or at least when they were near enough at their peak.
He was,
and yeah, he's really felt like one of the top candidates the last couple of years, and he's kind of stayed. And then there was the rumor that maybe he's staying because they get the Cowboys job. But no, I think at the minute the first name that comes to mind is Quinn.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a shoo-in for the job. The fact that he's a really good relationship with Pete Carroll and the GM as well, he's been there and done it with that team. He's coming off probably his two best seasons as defensive coordinator with the Cowboys. That's turned into the strength of their team. So I presume he'll be top of the list in Seattle. One person who won't be top of the list in Seattle will be Jim Harbaugh, who's after having a great week in terms of winning the national championships, but has a big beef with Pete Carroll going back to college coach and maybe 20 years ago almost. What did you make of the Jim Harbaugh and Michigan winning the college national title?
Yeah, I was very happy to see him. I don't think I say I have a straight college team. I'm a fan of a few, but Michigan is a fat team that I'm a fan of, obviously with the Detroit League. So it was nice to see him win it. And now obviously it's going to be a lot of talk if Harbaugh comes back to the NFL or not. Where do you think he stands there? Do you think he stays at Michigan for another year, or does he return back?
No. I think he's been itching to get back to the NFL for a few years now. Like, he almost had the Minnesota job a few years ago, and it seems to take it away from him at the very last minute. I think he'll be one of the managers that or head coaches that will be top of the list, and I will not be surprised if he ends up in Washington. I think they really want to have somebody experienced. It's a new franchise. They'll want somebody who's going to build a team. And that's one thing that Jim Harbaugh has in his pocket. He's shown in Michigan that he's able to build teams in the 49ers and Stanford over 2 or 3 years, that he can come up with a team that can compete. And I think that's exactly what Washington are looking for now. And I think they've got the big bucks to pay him. I think there's a lot of other franchises that will want him. But I think in terms of really giving him the resources, I think Washington have, 5 picks in the top 100. I think they have 9 draft picks. They have the second overall pick. So Jim Harbaugh will be able to, I'd say, pick his own quarterback in terms of, like, is he going to go with a Drake May? Is he going to trade down? And maybe a lad I like is Michael Penix Jr. I think he's going to end up somewhere and be a very, very good quarterback in the NFL. But I think at the moment, I would think the Washington Commanders top of the list, I think will end up being Jim Harbaugh, or the Lions offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. I think he is one of the hot names in the list, and I think he will have his choice of team. What do you make of Ben Johnson, and where do you see him ending up?
Yeah, obviously he's an offensive guy or a coach that really has been trying to keep quiet for the last couple of years because I remember he's been offensive coordinator. That's his second year, and it's like just try and keep the name quiet because a lot of teams are going to want him. And I feel last year he obviously had a few interviews and he was very close to joining the Panthers. But I think yeah, like you said, there's so many jobs going to be going this year. He feels like the next up and coming young offensive coordinator that a lot of teams look for, like your McVays and your Shanahan. So I've always, even mid-season, I've just always thought him and the Chargers would be a really good pair with Herbert there. I think they're just a trendy team, the Chargers, as well, with their bright uniforms and young players. So it's weird, and he's obviously there's going to be maybe the pick of the bunch, and I think Harbaugh was going to probably be at the top of a lot of teams' lists, but yeah, I've always identified really the Chargers for that Ben Johnson role, and I think he could be out the door, and maybe even the other coordinator and Aaron Glenn as well. I feel he's maybe less of an exciting one in that the Lions defense the last 3 years with him at the helm, it hasn't been anything amazing. It's been average, but he's just a leader of men, really, a bit like Campbell. He follows that way, and I feel he'd be a lot better head coach and coordinator. And I know he's already had three interviews as well. I think Commanders have requested to interview him, and the Panthers and Chargers as well. So I think the Lions potentially could lose both coordinators this offseason.
Yeah, I thought Aaron Glenn, I thought he came across very well in Hard Knocks there about a year ago. So he came across like a very cool dude and a real people person. So and the fact that he's got probably more out of the Lions defense than the sum of their parts kind of like bodes very well from him. Like they didn't have a lot of superstar names over the last 2 seasons, and he's managed to turn it around, especially after a kind of like a poor start of last season. Yeah, I think the Chargers have the advantage of having Herbert as a starting quarterback. Like if you look at all the other teams, none of them have a top 10 or top 15 quarterback. So that'll be the one. I think the offensive coordinators will be kind of gunning for the fact that they'd be able to have a quarterback in the door straight away. So yeah, I think that's a good call in terms of Ben Johnson going to the Chargers. What did you make of the whole Mike Vrabel thing? I mean, that kind of came out of the blue, and there was a lot of kind of backlash from the Tennessee players. They weren't very, very happy with the call.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, he's always felt one of the top coaches in the NFL, and I know Tennessee have maybe the last 2 years it hasn't been amazing. Obviously, they've finished with an under 500 record, but I don't know if you can really put the blame on Vrabel too much. It really feels like, roster building wise, it has fallen apart a little bit since that AJ Brown trade, where they send him to the Eagles and to draft Trayvon Burks for that first round pick, and he's not lived up to the expectation to really replace Brown. So obviously it seems like Derek Henry's leaving, and I'm sure they're going to sort of maybe go for a little rebuild. They changed GMs last season, so I feel it's a very harsh firing, and especially more of a weird one because you see more conversations now of coaches getting traded, and I think Vrabel, you would have thought, would have been one of those guys. But yeah, to fire him on the spot, he's definitely going to be a coach that I think is going to be straight back into things, teams looking at him, and obviously the Patriot links there looks quite likely with that, but we're still yet to hear on the Belichick news, really.
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of waiting for the hammer to fall on that one. But Vrabel, it was very interesting that he was inducted into the Ring of Fame with the Patriots during the season. And he talked about how the Patriots were such a great organization compared to some of the other organizations he worked with. And there was a lot of rumors that he wasn't getting on with the current GM. So I think that had a lot to do with his firing as well. Obviously, a 5-12 season is a pretty poor record. But I think he's one of these coaches that every team, especially teams that are looking for a defensive-minded head coach, will be looking at. And I think the Patriots are one of those teams. I think the Seahawks are one of those teams as well. I think most of the other kind of jobs that are on the line, they're kind of looking for the next offensive mind. The next person off the Mike or the Kyle Shanahan tree, and it'd be interesting to see where was it Frank Smith, the Miami offensive coordinator, ends up. He seems to be like one of the hot names coming off this year in terms of offensive coordinators as well. In terms of the Raiders, the Raiders is one of the great franchises. Do you think Antonio Pierce should get the job, or do you think they should look elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was actually funny enough talking to a Raider fan about this earlier, and I saw a video. Was it the last game of the season of him running down the tunnel in their final regular season game, and the fans were going crazy for him. You obviously hear the players, Devontae Adams, Max Crosby, they're all gunning for him to stay, but it kind of just feels like a Raiders move to just not keep him, despite everyone wanting him. I think they're going to make a big run for Harbour. It kind of, like I say, they sort of want that big move, and it's not really worked for them the last couple of years. But he does probably deserves to stay. Obviously, he's turned the franchise around since Josh McDaniels got fired mid-season. But I don't know, it just kind of feels like a Raiders move to just not keep him despite everyone wanting him.
The same thing happened with Rick Bisaccia there a year or two ago. But one of the interesting things I think for the Raiders is they really need a big personality. I think Jim Harbaugh certainly fits that bill. He will kind of turn it us against everybody kind of mindset, and I think that kind of suits the Raiders' personality. They want that kind of head coach who just their fans will love, their other fans will hate, and I think Jim Harbaugh certainly fits the bill. He's a really, really strong-minded head coach, and he doesn't take any crap off anyone.
No.
One of the teams that again who fired their head coach Arthur Smith, the Falcons, they seem to be a franchise just kind of under pressure. A franchise that's about to do something really big or really stupid. The way things are looking, I think they're going to either try and trade up to the first overall pick or second overall pick, or I think they could go after someone like Justin Fields. They have a history with wanting to have a quarterback who can run the ball. They thought about going after Lamar Jackson last summer, but they didn't. What do you think of Justin Fields? Do you think he is a starting caliber quarterback, or do you think he's a quarterback who could win you a Super Bowl?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one. The Bears have got a real interesting decision to make there with Fields and the number one pick. I've always been a big fan of Fields. Like I say, despite him being Ohio State, despite him being Bears, I'm still sort of worried to come up against him 2 times a season in Chicago. He's a quarterback that does damage through the air and through on his feet especially, but it's like I say, the Bears have fired their offensive coordinator today, so they're obviously going to make changes in that front, and I think a trade could be realistic for him. Like I said, I think it seemed more realistic 12 months ago. I feel he has finished the season quite strong, and the Falcons have been a destination which, like you said, have sort of linked with him and make a bit of sense, especially, like I say, Arthur Smith was a runner, and now someone that very much liked to run the ball, but with him gone, does that still get the link? So I think the Bears do end up keeping him and trading back from that number one pick. But yeah, it's sort of a franchise that's finding a moment for them, and an off season that's going to be interesting for them.
I think the Bears are going to pick at number one. And I think the reason is their general manager. I mean, last year he traded down, he got a good deal, he got DJ Moore, he got future picks, but CJ Stroud turned out to be gold. And I think he'd be under serious pressure if he was to trade down again and not select a quarterback, and Caleb Williams or Drake May end up lighting it up next season. He mightn't be around to cash in on the picks that he accumulates in the future. The Chicago sports crowd, they're not too forgiving. So I think he's going to sit down and he's going to take a shot at a quarterback at the first overall pick. And I think he's going to trade Justin Fields. Especially Justin Fields came off one of his worst performances of the season against the Packers. Maybe if he wins that game, they roll the dice with Justin Fields. But I think his record against the Packers, I don't think he's ever beaten them.
No,
which
it would be interesting.
Chicago quarterback is very, very poor, not being able to beat the Packers. One of the last ones that we haven't come to, okay, we've the Commanders, the Titans, and the Panthers. Is the Panthers the worst? Is it the worst franchise in the NFL?
Probably job-wise, yes, or at least for attractiveness. It's kind of funny because I think last off-season, I actually probably thought the Panthers was maybe one of the most attracting jobs. And like I say, 12 months down the line, worst record in the NFL, no first-round pick to show for it, an owner that's sort of maybe getting a bit too handsy in the franchise. And so, yeah, I definitely think they're sort of scraping the barrel, sort of like what the Texans have been for the last couple of years. But you've seen the turnaround they've made, so obviously it's capable to make that turnaround. But yeah, I think they're definitely going to sort of have the last pick of the coaches, we may say.
Yeah, I think it was Ben Johnson who actually turned him down last year. I think he was offered the head coaching job and he turned it down. Especially, as you said, the owner, David Tepper, he's very trigger happy. He's firing people left, right and centre. Frank Reich said he was very, very difficult to work with when he was still in the job. And then you look at the players that are kind of coming out of contract. Brian Burns doesn't want to stay. Frankie Louvi, the linebacker, doesn't want to stay. Like, when you have these veteran players who are the leaders in the team wanting to get out the door, it shows you that things aren't right. It'd be very interesting to see who they do end up with, because there's only 32 jobs. They will fill the position. I think you'll want a lot of guaranteed money, though, if you're a head coach taking over in Carolina. And then the last one, the Commanders. I'll give you my take on the Commanders. I really don't know what they're going to do. There seem to be too many cooks in the kitchen at the moment, in terms of, like, there's so many kind of part owners. Josh Harris is bringing everybody on board in terms of searching for a head coach. And to me, that it just kind of, sometimes you just don't want the blame to fall on you. I've seen it with other kind of franchises and teams in the past, that when you have too many people deciding who's going to be the next head coach, the reason for it is you don't want, if it doesn't work out, you don't want the blowback to be on yourself. And I'd like to see a bit more leadership in terms of Josh Harris as the owner. Again, I think it's an attractive place in terms of the team is very, very poor, but I don't think the team is looking for instant success. So I think they're really looking for, as I said before, kind of an experienced NFL coach. And one thing I'd really like to see the team do is try and build up, try and be the offensive line. Like, every kind of team in the NFL has their own signature of how they've played in the past, or a bit of history. And I think with Washington, it's always been having a strong offensive line and running the ball. And it's something that the franchise has just got away from, especially over the last 5 or 10 years. And I'd really like to see them kind of going back to that, to try and go back to that model in some direction.
Yeah, I know we spoke about it mid-season. I was just going to say, we spoke about it mid-season. You said Eric Bieniemy. Is that how you pronounce his name? Sorry, I don't want to mess it up there.
Bieniemy, yeah.
I know you that's a guy that I know you sort of were maybe wanting to get that promotion to the head coaching role. Do you still feel like that, or do you want to maybe test the market a little bit?
I actually think he would be a decent head coach. Halfway through the season, Sam Howell was playing really well, and the second half of the season completely dropped off. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that offensive line was very, very poor. He was getting smashed, 8 or 9 times every game. I don't think he's going to get the job. I think the fact that the team finished so badly, I think he's ruled himself out of the equation. And I think they're kind of looking for, again, they're probably looking for a bigger personality, somebody who has shown the experience of building a team. That's why I think, Jim Harbaugh might be Washington might be his first choice. But I look at the other teams or the other candidates, and I could see them kind of going after kind of like a Ben Johnson as well, because he's top of everybody's list. But another person I think that they would be very interested in going for is maybe Frank Smith, the offensive coordinator from Miami. Just the fact that everybody wants a Mike Shanahan or a Kyle Shanahan coach, and he's kind of come from that system. And if Josh Harris wants to kind of play with an offensive kind of flavour, I think he'll try and go after Ben Johnson first. But I could see Frank Smith being another one on the list.
Yeah, I feel one name that's sort of going under the radar is Brian Flores. Really, he's obviously he had the controversy with the Dolphins, but his defensive has always been so good in Miami, and he was DC for Minnesota this year. And his Vikings defense, I feel, were very underrated. They were one of the top in the league, and I feel that's his name sort of going under the radar a little bit with candidates, and I think he's going to end up somewhere as well.
Yeah, I think he's a brilliant coach, but I think he's burned a lot of bridges in terms of, remember when he went to sue the NFL?
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of owners that would like him, but won't go near him for that reason. There's kind of like a brotherhood of owners, and I think that'll be held against him. And Also, I think the fact that of the 7 or 8 teams, there's only about 3 teams that are kind of defensive minded. They'll probably go after a defensive coach, so that'll probably count against them as well. But maybe another year or two of him, of the Vikings defense balling out, maybe he'll get to change their narrative a bit. Maybe actually, if the Seahawks didn't get Dan Quinn, he could be a person to be looking at. So let's go back to the football and heading into wildcard weekend. We're going to start with your team, the Detroit Lions, welcoming the LA Rams. This is, for me, is the most exciting matchup of the weekend. How do you feel about it?
Nervous is one way to put it, for sure. I feel it can the end of that game's either going to be amazing or really, really horrible. But yeah, obviously there's so many storylines going into it, and I feel that's going to really be the talk of the matchup. But even the two teams on paper, really, the Rams have been really strong on the second half of the season. They're a team that I wanted to maybe avoid. But yeah, I feel on paper as well, these two teams are very exciting, and with the storylines combined, it's going to be a good match to watch on a Sunday night.
Yeah, there's just that added pressure more on Jared Goff than I think anybody else, because in terms of that trade a few years ago, he was kind of the one that was kind of probably worst handled. Matt Stafford went and won the Super Bowl, so the Rams will always be able to say they won the trade for that reason, unless Jared Goff goes on to win the Super Bowl with the Lions, and then they could say they both won the trade. But at the moment, it looks like it's worked out for everybody. I think the Rams' offense has been brilliant coming down the stretch. They're able to run the ball, they're able to pass the ball. Cooper Kupp probably hasn't been back to his best yet, but coming into this weekend, he will obviously be fitter than he has been over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I think the Rams probably pick out holes in the Lions defense that other teams can't. Do you think, in terms of confidence, are you confident that the Lions are going to win?
It is a strange one. I feel I'm confident in a Lions team, and like I said, I feel sort of when they're not the underdogs in a way. I know the bookies, they are still the bookies' favourite, but like I said, I feel there's definitely holes in this Lions defense, especially in the pass defense. I think the last 3 games, you look at Justin Jefferson's gone for 140 yards, and CeeDee Lamb went for 220 yards, and then Justin Jefferson's 170. So it's going to be a bit worrying facing Puka and Cooper Kupp there. I feel the run defense has been really strong. But yeah, like I say, Stafford could be in for a big day, and that's kind of not what you want to see. So I'm confident in a way. I feel the Lions were playing their best football at the start of the season. I do feel as the season's gone on, they have been a little bit, like I say, less consistent on offense, and there's holes in that defense. So I do feel like the Rams could have us for the taking, which would really hurt. But yeah, I feel at the end of the day, playoffs was always the goal for this at the start of the year. So, and winning the division was always the goal. So this kind of feels like the cherry to face, play a playoff game like this. But yeah, I wouldn't say I'm hugely confident. If the game was at the first month or 2 of the season, I would be confident. But yeah, right now, my confidence is maybe down a little bit.
What story with Sam Laporta's injury? Is he going to be okay?
Yeah, at the minute it kind of sounds like, I know Campbell said he has an outside shot to play. I think it's going to be a very game time decision. He didn't practice today, but it's kind of a very similar injury to Travis Kelce had earlier in the year. It's hyperextended his knee, and I think Kelce missed 1 week. It was off a short week, but he said he could have potentially played. So I'm sort of maybe expecting Sam Laporte to play. I think it's going to be very 50-50, but yeah, I don't think it's definitive he's out. And even if he's out there, it's probably going to be in a limited role, but I feel his presence has been amazing. He does so much for this offense that it just opens up distractions everywhere. So I think J-Mo's going to be back as well. So I think this Lions team's going to be healthy. And obviously the Rams look pretty healthy as well. So it's going to be a full strength matchup really, which makes it even better for the neutral.
Yeah, I think it's a really 50-50 game. I'm going to side with the Lions. I kind of liked what they did, especially in their probably the biggest profile game over the Christmas against the Cowboys. They outscored them, and really they did enough to win the game. It was a very tough call at the end to kind of done them out of the game. And I think that's probably taken a little shine off their season. The fact that they didn't get that big win in that big primetime game. But I think the Lions are in good nick, and I expect them to win on Sunday night, is it?
Yes, fair enough. Thank you. I'm glad someone has got confidence.
So let's go to another, the Cowboys against the Packers. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I feel for a 2 versus 7 seed. I feel this one's going to be really close as well. Like I said, I think the Packers are playing really good football on offense. Jordan Love's really, he's had a turnaround. He's someone that I doubted very much. And like I say, this second half of the season, he's been one of the best QBs in the league. And they're very young. And I think that's going to be interesting to see in the playoffs. So they're the youngest team in the NFL. So they're all going to be in a new experience. Playing at AT&T is one of the hardest stadiums to play at. I think the Cowboys are 16-0 really, or in their last games there, maybe 15-1 maybe. But like I said, I feel it's going to be maybe a very close game. You got the storylines as there with the coaches as well. So I could see a Packers upset really if this young team is up for it.
Yeah, there's so much speed. There's so much speed on the Packers that the indoor stadium I think is going to really suit them. But I think with the Cowboys, it's coming down to the last 2 minutes, and Dak's going to have the ball in his hands, and will he be able to get it done like he hasn't in the past? And I think he won't. I think if you look at all the primetime games where he's had the ball in his hands against the Eagles, didn't get it done, against the Dolphins, didn't get it done, against the Lions, got it done, but really should have lost the game as well. So I think there's a real problem in terms of the Cowboys closing out games. I think the pressure does get to them. I think they're used to blowing teams away, but when teams hang with them, they have a problem getting over the line. I think it's just the fact that it's such a huge franchise in America. It's such a big club. Like the weight of the Cowboys jersey is a lot heavier and carries a lot more expectation. And I think that does catch them on the big days. And I think you're right. I think the Packers could catch them in this matchup. It should be a good one though, because the Cowboys have probably been playing better than they've ever played in the last 20 years this season. But I think they rely too much on CeeDee Lamb. I think when you look at gets down to third down, Dak is looking for CeeDee Lamb every single time, and if he doesn't see him, he runs. And I think it's getting a little bit predictable that some teams are going to figure it out. Just if you can stop CeeDee Lamb on third down and stop Dak running with the ball, I don't think they really have much else in terms of getting that third down consistency. So I think there could be an upset, and there's nothing better when the Cowboys lose. As a Washington fan, it warms my heart to see the Cowboys lose, and I think they're going to have it tough. I think they're going to have it tough on Saturday night. So let's move quickly to the Bucks
Eagles.
Bucks Eagles. Oh my God! Yeah. You're going from two teams playing really well in terms of the Cowboys and the Packers to two teams. Well, I suppose the Bucks are playing kind of above themselves this season. For me, they've been a big surprise in terms of getting to the playoffs. I didn't see this in the cards at all this season. Baker Mayfield is a quarterback I don't particularly like, but hats off, he's had a really, really good season. Their defense has stepped up when it's needed to, and they're playing the Eagles, who have been awful over the last month. Do you think the Eagles will turn it around at the weekend?
Yes, I don't know if they do. I really don't know if they're able to turn it around. Like I say, that Jalen Hurts has picked up that little finger injury against the Giants there, dislocating his finger on his throw in the hand. That's gonna play an issue, like I say, in the coming weeks. And their defense, obviously, Matt Patricia's got involved there now, and like I say, the defense has really fallen off this season. We spoke about that, how it's not the same like last year. And like I say, I don't think Bucks are particularly the best team. I think you could maybe say these two teams are maybe the worst two teams on the NFC side of the bracket. But I think the Bucks defense is quite strong. And like I said, I really don't think the Eagles are up for it now. It kind of feels like even the vibe around there, like players are coming out talking and not good things really. AJ Brown's very vocal about it. And I think a shock exit out of round one definitely sets up for some talks with Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, I think Sirianni, if he loses this, he could be gone, because something just isn't right about the Eagles all season. At the start of the season, they were winning games, but they just weren't at the level that they were at last season. I think one of the biggest problems is last year used to dominate the run. They used to be able to run over everybody, and that's not happening this season. And it's kind of hard to see why, because they're only missing one player from their O-line last year. And I think their own line is playing well enough, but they're just, I don't know, it just seems to be just a different emphasis on their whole offense. You rarely see Hurts running with the ball as much as he did last season, which made him very, very unpredictable. But you know what? I think when you write a team off that is the better team on paper, they can come back with a bang. And I think the Eagles are going to, beat the Buccaneers. And I haven't been convinced with the Buccaneers all season. They've been managing to get wins, a lot of wins in the NFC South, which is a poor enough division. I don't know. I'm just not convinced by them. I think they have some brilliant, brilliant players. But I think at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, I'll roll with the better quarterback. And I think Jalen Hurts is a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield. So I think it's going to be an Eagles win. Not confident at all, but I think they'll pull it out of the bag. I think they've been waiting for the playoffs for so long. I mean, they had 10 wins, almost just over halfway through the season. I think they've been looking at the playoffs from a long way out. And I think there'll be a lot. I think they'll be ready for it. Compared to teams that have just probably got in the last week or two, I think they'll be eyeing this one from a long way out. So I expect the Eagles to put up a performance. So
Fair enough, really,
let's switch over to the AFC. The Kansas City Chiefs and the Dolphins. Another cracking matchup.
Yeah, that's going to be.
How do you see this one going?
Yeah, that's a real matchup there. Dolphins. It kind of always feels like I always feel they get the bad luck of the draw really in the playoffs, and this is another one away to the Chiefs. And like I say, the Dolphins have been a team that I feel injuries this last couple of games have really hurt them on the defensive end with Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips, and they've lost a few games down the back stretch here, which is mean they've lost the division. So I think this is probably maybe the biggest matchup, like superstar power of the week. But I think Kansas City maybe at home and the experience there. I particularly like both teams, and I think it would be really harsh to see the Dolphins go out in the wild card because I do feel they're one of the better teams in the NFL. And if they had an easier matchup, they could, with some momentum, they could get going. But to me, I feel the Kansas City, they're in it. They know what to do in this position. Playoffs is their football. They're kind of like the best team for the last 5-6 years here. So I see Patrick Mahomes there get into another divisional round where he could maybe meet his old friend Josh Allen.
Yeah, I hope so. Like, you know, they always turn up a great game. And I actually agree. I think the Miami Dolphins losing to the Bills, not having home advantage in the sun, is going to be a massive loss. They're going to be playing in below degrees Celsius. Tyreek Hill is coming up against a defense that probably know him better than anybody. And one thing I kind of noticed about the Dolphins game against the Bills is the amount of defenders that fell off tackles. I mean, you can't win in the playoffs if you're going to be missing tackles. And I thought some of their tackling against the Bills was embarrassing. And for that reason, I would rule out the Dolphins in terms of being a Super Bowl contender. Well, no, they are a contender, but in terms of winning the Super Bowl, I don't see them getting past this weekend because, as you said, I think the intensity is going to be ratcheted up, and I think the Chiefs are, you know, they can live with that heat in the kitchen. I'm not sure that the Dolphins can just based on the last few weeks and the fact that they're missing both pass rushers as well. Van Ginkel as well mightn't be available at the weekend. That's 3 pass rushers. How are you going to beat Patrick Mahomes when you can't get to him? I think the Chiefs are going to take this one. So the next matchup is
Buffalo Steelers and Browns Texans.
So let's go with the Buffalo and Steelers. For me, this is the easiest game to call of the weekend. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you there. Like I say, the Buffalo have been on a great streak recently, and Steelers, they've managed to sneak their way in really despite the QB issues going on there. So I don't ever want to count a team out or make it feel like it's so one-sided because in the playoffs you never know. And like I say, they could eat your words real easy. But with TJ Watt also expected to know, I think they ruled him out of missing this game. It really feels like an uphill battle for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I think Pittsburgh have done amazing to get to the playoffs considering they've had no real quarterback play the whole season. I mean, they've yet to have a quarterback really to ball out in any game. I think it shows just how good of a defense that they've got and just a great mentality. But they've also been running the last 3 or 4 games, they've been running the ball over 40 times and throwing it less than 20. I don't think you're going to be able to. The Bills know what's coming. I think to be able to stop the run, that's the end of the Steelers, and I think that's how it's going to play out. And the last matchup, the Texans and the Browns. Now this should be a good game. I think the met during the season was a bit of a cracker. So
the Browns.
CJ Stroud is back with the Texans. Yeah, the Browns defense is amazing. Do you think they'll be able to stop the Texans defense in terms of making this game kind of like low enough to win?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one because obviously the Browns have on paper maybe don't look amazing. I know they probably have one of the best defenses in the league, but Joe Flacco leading that there, coming out of retirement near enough off the sofa, they've not stopped. They've been really strong. Obviously, another team that loves to run the ball, but he's been throwing when they need to. I think he's had these 300-yard passing games multiple times, and against CJ Stroud, this young rookie who's taking the NFL by storm as well. I think it's going to be a real interesting one. It could have been maybe more interesting with Deshaun Watson there, a little more storylines. But yeah, I feel this is going to be one of the harder ones to call in a way. I think you could make a case for both teams, but I'm going to edge Cleveland. I think that defense has been really, really good there. And like I say, Texans are another young team that I feel, like I say, getting into this position is great, but it might be just a year early for them in a way. But so I'm going to lean with Cleveland, who are another team that I don't think have won a playoff game for a while.
Yeah, I'm going to actually lean the other way to the Texans. I do think the Texans rely too much on Nico Collins. I mean, they're down a few receivers, but they've always you know what? Actually, it's a really hard one. No, I'm going to roll with the Texans.
It is a tough one.
I'm going to roll with the Texans because when it gets close, I'll always go with the better quarterback, and I think CJ Stroud is. This time next year, he'll probably be recognised as one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league if he just keeps going the way he's going without actually doing anything different. But I think he finds a way to win. I think when he gets the ball in his hands and they need to score, he'll work them up the field. I think it's going to be a low-scoring affair. I've been very impressed with Joe Flacco. I think he's played better in the Browns than he's ever played for the Jets or even possibly even the Ravens for years upon years, with that Super Bowl year excluded. But yeah, he's playing some really good stuff. All they need to do is move the ball down the field, get the ball to Amari Cooper and a few good playmakers. He seems to have a good relationship with Njoku in terms of like throwing through the middle of the field as well. He's making him look like an absolute superstar. And the Browns have the defense. The Texans defense, very, very young. But I think they have been getting better as the season's gone on, and I think I'll just side with the Texans again. It's a toss of a coin, but I'll go with the Texans because of CJ Stroud.
Yes, there's going to be some great matchups for sure. That's what we know at the end of the day.
Hopefully, best of luck anyway at the weekend. The long-suffering Lions fans could do with a playoff win. When was the last playoff win? Do you know?
31 years ago, back in the last time they hosted a home playoff game was 1991, and then I think the last playoff win was a year before that. So it's been 33 years since a playoff win. Like I say, the storyline with Stafford not getting them the win, and now him returning. Like, could he stop them getting another win? It's crazy, really. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a great storyline, but I must say, I like Stafford. I think he's playing brilliant stuff, and I'd still give the edge to the Lions. Playing at home, I think is a huge advantage, and might be enough to get him over the line. Saying that's with Sam Laporta being healthy, but we'll see how that turns out. Okay, Conor, we're going to leave it for now, and we'll chat again next week. And enjoy the week. Enjoy the weekend's games.
Yes, everyone enjoy it, and we might have more news on the coaching after.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll get up to 8 or 9, up to 7 already, and nearly a third of the league head coach is sacked already. And I expect there to be one more by this time next week. All right, see you, Conor.
See you later.